Hey everybody, it's Chris with Walking Man Walks, back with another episode of How I Got Here, part 6. Stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss this one. Okay, so in last episode 5, I left off with me starting my training as a raft guide, having kind of an epic first trip down the Arkansas River. Now, a couple years on, I became an efficient raft guide. Actually, I was a very good raft guide. I had very little carnage, what we call accidents after that. I never really hurt anybody. I expanded onto the Gauley River in West Virginia. After that first year, like I said in my last episode, I met Terry and Brian from Washington. They talked me into spending my next few winters up in Washington State at Stevens Pass ski area. I became a ski patroller. I went through all the EMT stuff and training and enjoyed that very much. Ski patrolling is like I always say it's like one of the best jobs I ever had. Unfortunately, the pay rate at the time and still today is so low that you can't really survive in a tourist ski town on a ski patroller's salary. So it's something you could probably only do for a few years. Now, the caveat to that being said, is I have friends who have been ski patrolling for several years and they really enjoy it and they've managed to make it work. Some of them have wives who have good careers as like a nurse or even a doctor or something like that. And they're able to keep their ski patrol job because they don't need to make as much money. So I did that for a few years. I ski patrolled at Stevens Pass in the winter. I spent the summer on the Arkansas. Spring, I would guide on the Skycomish River in Stevens Pass. It was a great life. Although financially it was tough. I was always moving from temporary house to temporary house. I lived in one cabin along the Skycomish that flooded regularly, but it was right on the river, so we really enjoyed it. Me and my other ski patrol friends, about 5 of us, lived in an old abandoned gas station. I have no idea what that did to our health, drinking the water there and stuff. This is before bottled water was a thing, really. We just drank out of the sink there. I remember my bedroom was like the size of a closet.
It wasn't great.
There was no internet then, no cell phones. We had to run out to the payphone if we wanted to make a phone call. But we were totally enjoying the lifestyle. We skied every day. We hardly spent any time there besides sleeping and playing pool with our friends. It was a great lifestyle. I don't know how good it was for our health living in that gas station. I do remember the ground there was toxic because of leaky gas tanks. That's part of the reason the gas station got closed down. So we probably took years off our life living there, but that's neither here nor there, I guess. It was on the Tye River, which led into the sky. We could put in our kayaks right behind our house. It was great. We were living the life, having a great time. We all had girlfriends. Our girlfriends would come over. We played pool. But anyway, after a couple of years of that lifestyle, Terry, who was my best friend at the time, teaching me how to kayak, his good friend who he learned to kayak with, Jenner Coronel, was an Ecuadorian by birth, but they grew up together in Washington. Jenner had been doing kind of the similar lifestyle as us, guiding in California, though, not the Arkansas. I had met Jenner once. He came and visited us on the Arkansas, and we kayaked the numbers and all that stuff. But the end of winter 1995-96, Jenner called up Terry. He broke his collarbone mountain biking in Ecuador, where he had moved back to his home country. He was, a fluent Spanish speaker, but I think he lived in Ecuador till he was 8 years old and then went through school in the States. He was basically American in every respect. When you talk to him, you're like, he's an American. But so he moved back to Ecuador into the Amazon jungle to open a raft company called Rios Ecuador the year before. He was a great kayaker. He was doing all kinds of kayak exploration down there, rivers that had not been run. He had great stories about that. Maybe I'll try and get him on here sometime to tell one of his stories. Anyway, he had explored 3 or 4 different rivers that he thought would be good for a raft company. So he went down there. He started a raft company, Rios, Ecuador. And this winter, he was mountain biking there, and he broke his collarbone. So he needed a couple guides to come down and run his company for him. So that's where Terry and I came in. He called us up, said he needed us down there. It would be a great favor to him.
You owe me.
So we dropped everything. It was the end of ski season, April. We bought 2 tickets to Ecuador, I'll never forget. And within 2 weeks, we were in Ecuador. Now, I was still not that good of a kayaker. I've been kayaking a few years at that point. I was still, swimming a lot, missing my role. I didn't learn as fast as I could have, but I was, getting better. I was definitely getting better at running rapids and stuff. I wasn't great at rolling yet. But anyway, so this is where the story gets good. The second day we were down there, we were going to run this river called the Misialwi. I don't even know if I've always had the hardest time pronouncing it. I'll spell it here at some point in the video. But the Misialwi was a river that, was class 4-5, class 3-4-5, probably above my ability kayaking, right at the edge of Terry's ability kayaking. And Jenner had run it a couple times, but it hadn't been run a lot at the time. So we decided the second day, for some reason, that we were going to go run the Misialwi and see how it was for a 2-day kayak trip. We knew in the middle of the run there was this waterfall that was unrunnable at high water, but at lower levels you could walk around it and lower your boats down the dry side of the falls and get around it. So we get to the put-in that morning, and me and Terry and this other guy that had been hanging around that we met from Vail, I can't recall his name, but we'll just call him the guy from Vail. We decided we're going to put in that morning. We get to the put-in. The put-in is, a primitive village, a pastoral village with grass roof huts, and, the people there in the village speak a cross of Quechuan, the local language, and the native language, the prehistoric language, and Spanish. But from what we're getting, they're telling us, Jenner dropped us off with his broken collarbone and everything, telling us about the run and everything, what to expect. But the people at the village are telling us, oh, you can't go into the canyon. To them, the Misialwi, it's a deep canyon through the Amazon jungle. It's like kind of a sacred river, and they were like, they fished it. That was their lifestyle, was working the river, basically. They were telling us that it had been raining all night. It was still raining, that it was too high to go down there. And us, being young and dumb and cocky, we were like, oh, we're going to go anyway, And Jenner, he was also very confident in his abilities and our ability, I guess, to save our own asses. He thought we'd be fine, but it was a foot or two higher than it had been a couple days before when we were there. And a foot or two in a river is a lot of water. You're talking about thousands of gallons per minute going down the river. So we decided to put on anyway. I remember, I'll never forget, I was borrowing Jenner's one of his boats. We didn't bring any boats with us or really equipment besides helmets, life jackets, and, dry tops, that kind of stuff. I don't even think we had dry tops, actually, because it's so warm in Ecuador. It's kind of like here in the Philippines. You don't really need anything. You can go shirtless. You just need like a rash guard. But anyway, I was paddling his Overflow Ox, which was a boat made for a guy over 200 pounds. I mean, I was about the size I am now, maybe a little heavier, 165, 170 pounds. I was in really good shape, of course. I was ski patrolling, raft guiding, which keeps you in tip-top shape. So I had the Overflow Ox. I can't remember what Terry was paddling. These are older, longer boats, but they were creek boats. And this was more of a river run, a big water creek river type thing. Anyway, we went ahead and put in, the 3 of us, me and Terry and the guy from Val. And just side note, the guy from Val, right before he put in, let us know that he was a diabetic and he had a pump that he had on to, give him insulin whenever he needed it. Even back then, they used those pumps. It was like a square box, like that big. I don't know what they look like now. This becomes important later on in the story. So we put in about 45 minutes. We're floating down the river. It's high. We're moving fast. We get to the first set of rapids. It starts out big waves, crashing. It's big water. So we're definitely being cautious. Then all of a sudden, we're floating down the river. We get to a big horizon line where we can't see what's below us. But we know basically it's like class 4, maybe some 5 minus till we get to the big falls. So we're pretty confident. Those two guys catch an eddy, it's by now it's like a canyon on both sides. We can't really get out and scout too easily. It's also the jungle. We don't know what's in the jungle there. But those two guys catch an eddy. I try and hit the eddy and I miss it, come out the bottom, and I go floating into this big rapid without, knowing what's down there. I basically am survival kayaking now. I float into this giant hydraulic. A hydraulic is a big hole, like a wave that backs up on a slope. It starts flipping me like this, like crazy. I flush out, I end up swimming. My paddle and my boat go downstream without me. Those guys were too scared to follow me down the rapids, so they didn't. They pulled out on the side and started running down the bank as much as they could. I mean, a flooded river, the more it gets flooded, the higher it gets and the harder it is to run down the bank, especially in a canyon like that. I swim myself out of the river, which is a technique I had learned raft guiding. You have to be able to get your own self out of the river. It's self-preservation. I've seen people die like that on the river. They just kind of wait for somebody to rescue them. That's the worst thing you could do. You're kind of on your own out there. Kayaking's an individual sport. So I got myself out of the river. My kayak and paddle were gone. And those guys caught up to me, and they walked their kayaks around the rapid that I had swam, and we decided the best plan we could come up with, because we didn't really know where we were. We were 45 minutes down river, and down in the canyon, which seemed kind of impossible to hike out at the moment. So we decided I was going to swim in between the rapids, and those guys were going to help me get out above the rapids, which turned out to be a terrible plan. I did that for a few rapids. I ended up swimming a couple of huge rapids by accident. And I said, that's it. I'm going to walk around I'm just going to walk along the river. And they decided that it was probably too big to run the falls that we knew was down there. That would be a killer. It wasn't a high falls, but the hydraulic and the water it would have made at that level would probably drown one of us. What we did was we stashed their boats along the river, and we hit them real well. We dragged them up on the bank so they wouldn't get caught in the river if it kept rising. We decided we were going to hike up to the top of the canyon, hike back to the put-in, just accept defeat and call it a day. And this is where the adventure really starts. So we stashed their boats. My boat's gone downstream. And we start hiking out. The banks of the canyon are super muddy. I mean, it's steep, it's dangerous. We had machetes in the back of our kayaks because somebody said, if you might need machetes to scout stuff. So we did have a couple of machetes, luckily. As we were hiking up the bank, I'll never forget this, Terry and I were right next to each other, and as he was hiking up, he turned over a stump or something. This giant green snake that looked really deadly with a diamond head came rolling out, and quick as a flash, he had a machete in his hand. He lopped the thing's head off, which probably saved him because if he would have gotten bit by a poisonous snake where we were, that would have been it for him. He would have been dead after that. So anyway, we hike through the mud, we hike up this canyon wall. We finally get to the top after probably an hour of hiking up the canyon wall, sliding back down, basically grabbing whatever we could, trees, bushes to get up. And we get to the top, and now we're in the middle of the Amazon jungle, somewhere on the border with Peru and Ecuador. And we know we have to get back upriver, so we're just going to follow the river back up. But we're so far up off the river, it's kind of hard. The jungle's thick to follow the river. I mean, we're going through thick jungle, no trails, spider webs, giant spiders, all kinds of weird insects and animals around. We're wearing Teva sandals, shorts, and I think I had a rash guard on, a short sleeve rash guard, and that's it. Of course, it wasn't cold, but it was still pouring rain this whole time. By now, it's like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So we decide we're going to hike back up as fast as we can to get out of there, because the guy from Vail is a diabetic. We have a couple candy bars and we each had a a Nalgene bottle of water. You can't just drink the water anywhere in the jungle. You might get sick from it. So we start hiking. We're looking for a trail. Eventually, we find an old hunting trail, and we're following that. It's a narrow trail, but we're hoping it takes us to where we want to go. I mean, we spend hours hiking in the jungle. It gets dark out. We're still hiking. After 3 or 4 hours, the guy from Val's losing energy. We gave him all our food, but by now we're carrying him between us on our shoulders. He could barely walk anymore. Finally, at about 4 in the morning, we get to the village where we put in. After 8 or 10 hours of hiking, we took breaks, obviously, and stuff. But luckily, we were all in our early 20s, young and strong. But after 8 or 10 hours of hiking, while beside the guy who had diabetes from Val, he was getting weaker and weaker as we went on. But we finally get up back to the village, and we realize we're on the wrong side of the river. I mean, in this part of the world, there's not bridges in every town crossing the river, and the river is still raging. In fact, it was higher than we put on. So we looked around real quick. It's the middle of the night. We found a dugout canoe, which is what the locals there use to fish in. So we took that dugout canoe, and I mean, it was really tippy and sketchy, but we put the guy from Vail in the middle, and me and Terry each grabbed a paddle, and we ferried it across the river. It's quite a wide river, the Misiawi, but we made it. We left the canoe there. We left some money in it, some Ecuadorian sucre. They've since then switched to the dollar, but then their currency was called the sucre. We left a few thousand sucre, what we had, I think, in the canoe, and started hiking up the road back towards Tena, which is the town we stayed in. And we pretty quickly, we came across a taxi. We got a ride. By now it's morning. We got a ride back to town, and basically we survived. The adventure was over. But that was the second day of a 3-month trip to Ecuador. So after that day, me and Terry kind of settled in. We took a few days to recover. I remember I had this huge cut on my arm from the jungle, and we made good friends with one of the local medicine men. His name was Delphine, and he gave me this tree sap called Sangre de Drago. Healed up my cut on my arm in just a few days. It was an amazing tree sap. I've always wondered if anybody has turned that into a medicine or something, but I'm not sure. But anyway, it was a red tree sap called Sangre de Drago. But Delphine turned out to be one of our amazing friends there. So the village was at the put-in of the Hatanyaku River, where we put in for most of our raft trips. On our regular daily raft trips that we did, it was a different river than the Misiawi. It's called the Napo, is the Spanish name, and the Hatanyaku is the Quechuan name, the local indigenous name. Anyway, the put-in there was like a 100-foot cliff that we had to rappel the raft down because we couldn't get it down the trail that the people walked down. So I would hold on to this raft while we rappelled it down the 100-foot cliff to keep it from getting snagged, but I wouldn't tie myself to it in case the rope broke or something and the raft fell. Wouldn't want it to fall on top of me. So what we did was we asked Delphine if we could hire his village to help us build a trail down to the river that we could get the raft down. And it was a great experience. We ended up, working with the whole village for a couple days, building the trail. And all they wanted from us was 2 bottles of rum, 2 packs of Marlboro cigarettes, and a big bag of rice for payment. And I'll never forget, in the middle of the day we were working, everybody, the kids, the old people in the village stopped for a break, and they all had a smoke of the Marlboro cigarettes that we had paid them to help us build the trail. Anyway, it was a great experience. I wrote an article about this trip a few years ago, but I really wanted to get it out there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next video.